Howdy, Kanaji here. In honor of Hello Games' announcement that they're re-releasing the first 4 No Man's Sky expeditions for a limited time, I decided to bump up the release of a video I've been planning on making for a while. This is All No Man's Sky Expeditions, Ranked and Reviewed, 2021 edition. The Definitive List. Ultimate. For those of you who missed out, No Man's Sky Expeditions are isolated game modes available for a limited time. During that time, you complete milestones on your adventure to unlock exclusive rewards. 4 expeditions were released in 2021 and are being re-released for a limited time over the holiday season. So the idea behind this video is simple. I'll give a brief review of each expedition and then assign it a score based on 8 pillars. The first 4 pillars were what the game was marketed on: explore, fight, trade, and survive. The next 4 pillars I came up with as a way to judge expeditions specifically. These are story, also known as lore or narrative; novelty, meaning how unique of an experience did the expedition give us; rewards, because no quest would be complete without a treasure chest at the end; and finally, fun. Was it actually an enjoyable experience, or just a grind for rewards? Now I need to clarify that these scores are based on the original release of each expedition. I am aware that Hello Games will be rebalancing the milestones for each of these expeditions come this holiday season, so if an expedition sounds fun to you, but I describe it as grindy, chances are that the current iteration of that is no longer as bad, so why not give it a try? In fact, I would go ahead and recommend all 4 expeditions if you love the game. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I go any further, this is your official spoiler warning. I will be spoiling milestones, lore, rewards, what have you, for each expedition. But alright, let's get into it, starting with the first expedition, the Pioneers. Released alongside the Expeditions update on March 31st, 2021, the Pioneers expedition ran for about 6 weeks. It was No Man's Sky's first attempt at an expedition, and due to this, it was a little unfocused in my opinion. There wasn't any kind of narrative to the expedition, rather you were simply moving from rendezvous to rendezvous, completing time-consuming and repetitive tasks along the way. And I do mean time-consuming and repetitive. Listen to these examples. Farm 35 plants, complete 15 fleet expeditions, learn 50 alien words, discover 35 star systems, and that's 35 undiscovered ones, mind you. Steal 30 whispering eggs, destroy 50 sentinels, chart 60 undiscovered waypoints, collect 50 storm crystals, you get the idea. It was a lot of grind for grind's sake, and normally I'd be really forgiving of this kind of thing in No Man's Sky, but for the life of me, I don't know why they needed 60 waypoints or 35 star systems discovered. Since everyone starts on the same planet, you really had to go out of your way to do this. So why not just like 20 waypoints and 10 star systems? Why so many? I don't know. Let's go to the scoreboard and start rating this thing though, because we have a lot of ground to cover. Boop! Okay, so for these pillars, I am rating them both on how much content was focused on each pillar, as well as how successful that content was. So, let's start with Explore first. I would give it an 8. That may seem high, but most of the milestones were focused on discovery. You'd have to visit different types of systems and different types of planets and underwater ruins, and a derelict freighter, and way too many unique waypoints. Which is why it's an 8 and not a 10. But for fight, I give it an 8 as well. You have to fight a ton of biological horrors and sentinels, as well as clear derelict freighter in order to progress, so there's plenty of combat to be had. For trade, I'm also giving it an 8. I know, but I didn't go over all the milestones, but there are some for earning units, earning nanites, gaining favor with the guild, obtaining A-class equipment, and even one for making a 1,000,000 unit sale. So trade was definitely important to this expedition, if not in many unique ways. The last of the 4 pillars is survive, which I will give a 7. There were a few survival-based milestones, and the 50 storm crystals were definitely a survival challenge. So before I go any further, I should note that my rating scale is from 1 to 10, and that means 5 is average. Not bad, but average. So a 6 would be above average, and a 4 is below average. Cool? Alright, let's move on to the second set of pillars. For story, I gave it a 1.5 because there is no story. There's no new lore, no real narrative to the journey at all. But why didn't I give it a straight 1, you ask? Well, I give it a little bit of credit for being the first one. The name Pioneers suggests that we were the first to go out and test this new experience. So there's a bit of a meta narrative there, just nothing concrete to point to. For novelty, I give it a 4. The experience itself was novel since it was the first expedition, but there was nothing unique to the expedition itself other than the rendezvous and rewards. It was pretty much just regular gameplay to grind for rewards. At the time I loved the novelty of a new game mode, but even then I knew it had more potential than it was actually achieving. So for rewards, I give it a 10. Now, I know that seems high, but hear me out. The expedition gave us a little of everything. Rewards included the exclusive flag for base building. This was a unique model and unlike any other flag or banner. We got new fireworks which explode into the image of the Atlas, which is cool. A golden first spawn helmet, which is alright, but we also got a new jetpack, which if you don't know, there are only 3 jetpacks in the game. They added character customization back in 2018, and in the 3 years since, they've only added 2 jetpacks. So this was a huge deal to me. Plus it looked cool to boot. We also got a decal, player banner, and title to commemorate the occasion. All of this is great, but I gave it a 10 for the final reward, the Golden Vector. This ship is my darling. It's a golden alpha vector decorated with exotic ornaments and is unlike any other ship in the game. It comes kitted out with all S-Class upgrades, and it's one of only a handful of ships that doesn't require the photon cannons to be installed. So all in all, the expedition gave us a ton of both unique and useful rewards that would appeal to all kinds of players. Finally, the last pillar is the fun factor. So this one I have to rate below average at 4. I genuinely enjoyed the expedition all the way through, but I didn't enjoy it because of its story or objectives. I enjoyed it because I played it with a friend, and because it was a new experience. Unfortunately though, it was just way too grindy. Luckily, they fixed that in future expeditions, and it's likely fixed in the re-release, but at the time it was a huge time sink full of repetitive tasks and frustrating grind. Still, I was quite satisfied by the end. So if we average all 8 pillars, we have an overall score of 6.3125, which I will abbreviate as 6.3. Not bad for a first go, and as far as our rankings go, it's firmly at the top for now. But let's see if things improved at all with Expedition 2, Beachhead. Launched on May 17, 2021, and running for 2 weeks, the Beachhead Expedition was pretty unique. Easily completable in a couple of hours or so. Beachhead was a short romp. However, it featured encrypted milestones near the end that couldn't be completed until a community mission had been completed, thus unlocking the required equipment in the Quicksilver shop. So, about 5 days into the expedition, this unlocked and revealed what the expedition was really about. The final phase brought players face to face with the SSV Normandy SR1 from Mass Effect. And let me tell you, this was as big a surprise as any. No Man's Sky had just had its first crossover event, and it was glorious. I'll go into more detail as I rate it, so let's get started. I give it an Explore score of 8. It had multiple milestones tasking you with visiting certain types of planets and stuff, but nothing to really pull you away from the ordinary. For Fight, I give it a 1, since I don't believe there was a single combat-based milestone in the whole expedition. For Trade, it gets a 2, since it didn't really require any buying or selling of items, with the exception of a couple of Quicksilver items you needed. And for Survive, I also give it a 2, since it didn't focus on that either. So based on these 4 pillars, it's not looking too hot, but I really enjoyed it, so let's see if the other pillars can redeem it. For Story, I give it a 9. While the first half of the expedition doesn't feature much in the way of story, the second half becomes a lore-palooza. Once you unlock the historiographical dosimeter, you join the anomalous research community mission where everyone needs to scan plaques and monoliths for secret lore. This lore was really cryptic and talked about a weapon of some kind that would return. This led to rampant speculation, with maybe a couple of people guessing Mass Effect. But then, once all of this was completed, we actually get to encounter the Normandy warping into the atmosphere above us in what I consider to be like a top 5 No Man's Sky moment of all time. Speaking of which, this score is a 10 for novelty. This is the only time the game warps in a frigate while you're on foot, and it's the only crossover event No Man's Sky has ever done. The resulting frigate is the only recon class in the game, and the unique lore and setup were genuinely surprising. That's the kind of novelty I look for in a one-off expedition. For rewards, I'm a bit split. In reality, the only unique items you walk away with are a commemorative banner and decal, plus a couple titles, and the Normandy joins your fleet. Of course, I'm a big fan of the commemorative decals, so that's nice, but it's almost a given that you'll get one. That just leaves the Normandy. As a frigate, it's actually really great. It's S-class and is the only recon type in the entire game. That means it's proficient in both exploration and combat. You can send it on expeditions by itself, in fact. However, many players don't really engage with frigate gameplay, and many of them don't care about Mass Effect. And many of them don't want a ship from another sci-fi universe in their game, because it breaks their immersion. So, that and the fact that this is the only frigate you can't explore on foot means it's cool, but definitely not for everyone. Therefore, I think a neutral 5 is in order for the rewards pillar. Last but not least, was this expedition fun? And that is an easy yes, definitely. I may even replay it when it comes around again just to experience that final phase. It was short enough that it almost never felt grindy, making it a breeze to enjoy. I give it a 7 for fun then. This gives us a final score of 5.375, which I will round to 5.4 on the leaderboard. So our new rankings are number 1 Pioneers and number 2 Beachhead. Beachhead was a more enjoyable experience, but it was really small, just a couple of hours of gameplay, and the rewards were limited. That being said, I'd personally rate it higher than Pioneers, I think, so stick around for my personal rankings at the end of the video. For now, let's move on to Expedition 3, Cartographers. Released after the Frontiers update on September 8th, 2021, and running for over 5 weeks, Cartographers marked the return of expeditions after an over 3-month wait, frankly. Luckily, this was a pretty meaty expedition based on a novel idea. What if instead of traveling across the stars, you spent an entire expedition trying to escape one planet? Welcome to Gisto Major. Enjoy your stay. So I'm going to get right into the scores for this one. For Explore, I give it an 8. This expedition is all about looking at exploration from a different angle than we're used to. Instead of having to visit 100 planets, we're instead tasked with discovering everything this one planet has to offer. We're diving into lakes, climbing mountains, digging tunnels, and scanning wildlife in an effort to conquer this planet and eventually escape it. I personally really like this spin, and I found myself becoming very familiar with the areas around my base. I could elaborate more, but I should move on to the next pillar. For Fight, I give it a 5, which is to say, average. You had to steal some larval cores and kill a few carnivorous plants, but otherwise it's not really combat focused. It's also not focused on trade, though you will spend time purchasing components, mining with industrial equipment, and selling acquired goods. So while the milestones aren't quite focused on trade, it will play a modest part in your journey, so another 5 out of 10. Now, if there is something this expedition is focused on, it's survival. Being marooned on a toxic planet with no immediate way to fix your ship is a classic sci-fi survival story if ever I heard one. In fact, the gameplay took me back to 2016 when survival was more difficult. I actually enjoyed the challenge this time, and it felt good to put my experience to work. So for Survive, I'm going to give it a coveted 10. Moving on, I give the story a 6, above average. While the expedition doesn't give you any new lore or story elements, the narrative of having to escape the planet was pretty engaging. Yes, it's similar to the beginning of the normal game, but its presentation was more focused. Also, the milestones were actually relevant to this narrative, unlike the majority of the last 2 expeditions. For novelty, I give it a 6. An expedition set on a single planet with something I didn't see coming honestly forces you to play No Man's Sky in a way the normal game never asks you to. What holds it back, however, is that the actual activities you're doing on that planet are pretty standard fare for No Man's Sky. Yes, the ship you're fixing is unique to this expedition, but only in order to make it more difficult to fix. The rewards for this expedition were pretty neat, but mostly geared towards base builders. You're given 7 exclusive blueprints for some pretty desirable items. For people who like character customization, a unique bubble trail for the jetpack is their reward. I also thought this would be cool to pair with like the Fishhead Traveler appearance in order to roleplay as an aquatic species. Of course, you get a commemorative title, banner, and decal as always. The final big reward was an egg that would hatch into your very own biological horror companion. For some people this is cool, but personally I didn't like the fact that it wasn't really procedural at all, so they all looked the same between each player. And since you only have 6 companion slots, I opted to save mine for more unique specimens. So overall, lots of base building parts, a little character customization, and 1 exclusive companion. I would give it a 6, above average, only due to the number of exclusive blueprints. Lastly, I give it a fun factor of 6. I really enjoyed the survival challenge, but RNG factors heavily into what kind of an expedition you'll have. Plus, since the entire thing takes place on one planet, it can get a bit visually boring at times. Still, I liked how it turned the concept of No Man's Sky's infinite universe on its head, and overall I enjoyed it. Speaking of overall, its final score is 6.375. If we take that rounded up to 6.4 and compare it to the others, I'm surprised to see it just beat out Pioneers. So that gives us a new ranking of number 1 Cartographers, number 2 Pioneers, and number 3 Beachhead. Again, I'm going to give my personal rankings at the end of this video since I would probably arrange these a little differently. So the last expedition of 2021 is Emergence, released October 20th, and which ran for about 4 weeks. This expedition can be summed up in one word: sandworms. Released the same week as the new Dune movie, they couldn't have picked a better theme. Taking everything they'd learned from the past expeditions, this gem gave us unique gameplay encounters, a storyline to follow, new lore, and impressive rewards. So let's jump right into the ratings. Explore gets an 8. While a few milestones do task you with seeking out certain things, it's a sense of discovery that this expedition really excels at. As you move from one worm-infested planet to the next, you'll be exploring deserts on foot, looking for nests and cursed dust. You'll be digging up bones as titan worms leap overhead. You'll comb through derelict freighters, search archives, and confront the Atlas itself. Along the way, you're discovering fragments of lore. It's just a very fulfilling experience of discovery and wanting to see what's next. For fight, I have to give it an 8. In addition to biological horrors and whatever you encounter on a derelict freighter, you're also on a journey to hunt down the children of these titan worms. So you move from planet to planet, exterminating these giant larvae as they spring out from the ground. These are a completely new enemy type that are so far exclusive to this expedition. For context, it's been over a year since they last added new enemies in 2020, which were added to derelict freighters in the Desolation update, so it's kind of a big deal. Unfortunately, they're pretty easy to kill, and have a limited range, so not much of a challenge. Hopefully they'll give them a spit attack for the re-release. For trade, I give it a 5. The expedition isn't really focused on trade at all, but you do come across a lot of valuable resources, and you'll probably end up selling them to help pay for the equipment and materials you'll need to build certain things. So it is part of the expedition, but not really prominent at all. For survive, it's an 8. So 4 out of 5 of the infested planets are extreme heat planets, and surviving while you make your way across them is a major part of the journey. In fact, the game straight up starts you with extra heat protection because it's so prevalent. So what about the story? Well, that's a 9.5, easy. From the lore of the worm cult to your personal journey to rid the universe of the infestation, this expedition is well structured. Your actions have a direct impact on the narrative, and even features a conversation with the Atlas, which is way cool. On top of that, the final milestone's action directly leads to the final reward. Speaking of which, I give it a 9 for rewards. And yeah, I know I'm a bit out of order, sue me. Anyways, you get a good mix of rewards here. For the fashion-minded, you get a unique Viking head that is essentially a sandworm for a face. It's awesome and surprisingly customizable. You also get the ghastly trail for your jetpack. This is actually my new favorite trail. Of course, my favorite color is green, but it also makes me feel like a horseman of the apocalypse. Everywhere I fly, worms and locusts and slime come pouring out over the landscape. It's very fun. Base builders get a glowing skull, which makes a perfect fireplace ornament, or thematic entrance. Everyone else gets flesh launcher fireworks, which fire a spinning wheel of flesh and bugs. You also get the standard title, banner, and decal. And while all of this is already cool enough, you also get a rideable Titan Worm companion. These are completely procedural, unlike last expedition, and grow to incredible sizes. I love it, and unlike the last expedition's reward, I would totally give it a spot in my 6 companions. So backing up a bit, I give Emergence a novelty score of 10. The milestones tie into a unique story, the lore is delivered through unique items and tech, there are unique enemies, unique resource deposits, heck, even the planets you visit are unique, being infested with Titan worms. Almost every element is bespoke, and that makes this possibly the most novel experience I've had in the game, even surpassing the Living Ships quest. And that leads me to giving it a fun score of 9. I really enjoyed this thing, and it wasn't too long either, so I beat it in less than 5 hours, and it never really dragged at any point. So overall, that gives Emergence the highest average yet, with 8.3125 on the scoreboard. That's pretty impressive, and shows that Hello Games is both listening to feedback and improving the techniques for building these experiences. It also makes me really excited for whatever comes next. But for now, let's look at the final rankings. Number 1 is Emergence with an 8.3. Number 2 is Cartographers with a 6.4. Number 3 is Pioneers with a 6.3. And lastly, we have Beachhead with a 5.4, which is a deceptively low score. But wait, there's more, because I'm an opinionated man. I won't stand for this ranking that I had complete control over. Instead, let me give you my real rankings. So, number 4, Pioneers. I give it a 7. I liked it, but it was way too grindy and it wasn't coherent in any way. Number 3, Cartographers. I also give it a 7. It made more sense, but was often still just a pain in the butt. Number 2 is Beachhead. Short but sweet. Didn't overstay its welcome, but offered some of the game's biggest wow moments. Plus, I got a recon frigate. And finally, number 1 is Emergence with a score of 9, because yeah, I love sandworms. So there you go, the definitive ranking of all 4 expeditions so far. Thank you so much for watching this far. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of this format and which expeditions you like best and why. I'll be continuing this series with each new expedition, so I'll take feedback into account for sure. If you enjoy this kind of detailed content, why not subscribe? It's free, and my channel is still small enough that every subscription gets me closer and closer to unlocking community features. So every sub actually helps a lot, believe it or not. Like each just you clicking one subscribe makes a difference. But thanks again for watching, and I will see you later. Bye!